Red collar.
Begin. Welcome to the PIDE webinar. Our webinar series are an attempt to learn about Pakistan. I think something that we have postponed for a long time, and to establish a dialogue across communities so that we have a policy dialogue in the country, because unfortunately we don't. Second purpose of the webinar is that we want our students and academia to get involved in what they in research in Pakistan. So some of these subjects that we are talking about, hopefully, and we are trying to do this in PID, we are going to make these research subjects for our students. So that is why I urge our speakers to be as technical and as pointed as possible so our students can learn. This is a very important subject that we're going to take up today. I thank Harun Sharif again for coming forward and helping us organize this. Harun is an innovative man. He puts together excellent panels. Last panel was one of the most successful we had. So thank you, Harun. We are going to discuss the subject of white collar crime. And I sort of tried to add a twist, which I hope we can discuss. That what is the bigger evil? Is it white collar crime or is it inefficiency? And I think that's, we should take it up, because is the country dying of corruption or is the country dying of inefficiency? And I think that is something that we will discuss today. We got an eminent panel, obviously people who know the subject very well. I know nothing about it, so I will not even pretend to give you any idea of what we're going to talk about. But our panel is very, very well qualified. We've got Mr. Shoaib Saddle, Dr. Shoaib Saddle, who is very well known as a crime fighter. He's been in many positions, from FIA to police to everything. He's been a well-known personality in fighting white-collar crime as well as crime in general. Been on, GITs and things to analyze how white-collar crime has behaved. So I think we'll learn a lot from him. We've got Mr. Harun Sharif, former Minister of Investment, who's worked in many positions as well, and who knows this area very well too. And then we've got Amir Bilal Sufi, a famous lawyer, a very successful lawyer, who's engaged in, he's also got his own legal think tank and has many such, efforts to his credit, trying to find out about white-collar crime, money laundering, etc. Then we've got Mr. Dr. Ahsan Sadiq, currently serving as FIA Director General in the crime wing. So our panel knows this area very well. What I'll do is I'll just start with the panel. Let's say if you guys can do a brief opening statement, then we can go to a discussion. But I would just like to add from my own side, my question: what is hurting us more? Is it white-collar crime or is it white-collar inefficiency? For example, we have lost $7 billion in arbitration from Recodec and from Karke, etc. And that sounds like it was an inefficiency because we couldn't prove corruption. So quite frankly, that was the inefficiency on our part. We have lost 5.5 trillion rupees in energy. That also is inefficiency, not corruption. Whereas I don't think NAB, Shoaib Saab will confirm, I don't think NAB has really proven that anybody is corrupt. So Shoaib Saab, please, why don't you tell us about white-collar crime and inefficiency? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab, for organizing this event. As you say, it is a really very, very important subject. And it is hurting us, I think, the most. But let me briefly, give you an overview of the subject, and then I'll come to this question, which is hurting us more. Is it the white-collar crime, or is it the inefficiency of our bureaucracy? It is a very important question, in fact, which you have raised. In the modern criminological theory, it was in 1939 that Edwin Sutherland first raised this issue. Although in that address to the American Sociological Society, he did not elaborate what he meant by white collar crime. And that came in 1941 in, an article which he wrote. Basically, what he said was that white collar crime is a crime which is committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of his occupation. So actually he was dealing with the criminality or deviance, so to say, of different these companies are dealing with drugs and so on and so forth. So that is how he felt that the economic cost of this sort of criminality was actually much more than the impact of either burglaries or even robberies or so his entire police system set up to go after cycle thieves and whatnot, but the people who are really plundering the wealth of the state through different ways and means are actually who get salutes from the law enforcement agencies. So this is the brief background when this all started. Since then, there have been a number of different definitions. But we are now settled with this sort of definition that it is, basically a financial crime for gain, either of money or of property or of any services, primarily through deceit or guile. So the element of violence is normally missing. And it is mostly difficult to identify who is the direct, victim, because the victims sometimes entire nation is the victim, and that we have seen through the sort of cases that we had, in the media in the recent years, starting from Panama and so on and so forth. So basically, the whole issue is that why are we unable to, contain this sort of activity? There is hardly any country where one can say that there is no white collar crime, as one cannot say that there is no ordinary crime, the street crime. So it is only a matter of degree. But in our case, since white collar crime is primarily, falling around the people who are in the government. It is the prime ministers, it is the ministers, it is the top secretaries, the people down below. And when we talk of inefficiency, we know that inefficiency is covered under what we call misconduct of a bureaucrat. So in that context, inefficiency is a white collar crime, because white collar crime deviance or infringements are both dealt with by both criminal sanctions as well as by civil sanctions. So, and this is again something which we need to ponder over, because in our system, most of the cases are ending up nowhere. So we have to sort of think about it, that demanding in every case evidence beyond reasonable doubt, is it reasonable to do that? Is it the current international practice, or do we have to change? And I'm sure the speakers following me will tell us, Sufi Saab, about the international practices, about the standard of evidence required under CAC, UNCOC, of which I was also a part during early 2000s. So if we take a broader view of bureaucracy, it is not merely inefficiency to which Dr. Naeemul Haq has referred to. It is through our, one can say, lack of expertise. It is our, collusion with the other parties at times. It is due to what we can say our failure to control what we become a party to when we are aspiring for different positions and we want to stay in those positions and so on and so forth. So if we take that broader view, then inefficiency is a bigger curse. And in any case, when we will have to put in place a relatively more effective regime of investigators and prosecutors and the adjudicators, the judges, this element of this will be a common denominator everywhere, whether we are talking of a judge or we are talking of a prosecutor or we are talking of an investigator, or we are talking of just others who are not doing their normal duties. In this context, I was looking at code of conduct of civil servants of a country. And it contained a provision which is very relevant to this discussion, that no civil servant will act contrary to law or to the provisions of the Constitution. Now, that covers everything. Here, we do it every day and with impunity, rather at times in collusion. And this is a very strange thing, that when, if at all, we are caught, we become approvers. And we keep, deliberately keep certain loopholes so that the cases don't end up, where they need to end up, in a decent society. So the result is that we are suffering hugely, and day in and day out. We all know what are our standings, say under Transparency International. We rank 120th out of 180th. Our score last year was 32, and this has stayed, around that. Sometimes 30, sometimes 29, sometimes 31, 32. That's the maximum we have. So why is it so? And especially when every government that has come to power has spoken against corruption. So who is then, doing corruption? You look at the statistics, there are hardly any convictions because I need to raise, because I don't have much time, but I need to raise this issue. The bureaucratic system that we have inherited, honestly, is a pro-corruption system. It is not a system which will deliver us, honest and professional civil service. So we need to, discuss it, that if corruption is a normative dimension of our bureaucracy and of our entire system, then what should we do? Rhetoric that yes, we are against corruption and we will not allow corruption to happen, and those who are corrupt will be brought to justice, is not going to make a difference. So I think I should leave it here, because we have been given 10 minutes each. But I'll be more than happy to, because I have international experience. There was a time when I headed the economic crime wing of FIA. So in fact, the first accountability that was done in this country, I was heading that process, but we all know what happened to those cases. And you can see their fate in a book written by a top bureaucrat. So our bureaucracy is the real issue, in my view. And if we don't fix the bureaucracy, the issue of prevention and control of white-collar crime will not be fixed. Thank you very much.
Deem, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Shoaib Saab. I think this is a good overview. Yes, white-collar crime is a problem, but as you said, ultimately it's a question of how we configure our government. So let me turn to Harun. Harun Sharif Saab, please. How do we look at this issue? I mean, my view is that incompetence is costing us far more than corruption. And I want to come back to Shoaib Saab on that, and also to Sadiq Saab. Why is it that we can't prove corruption? But first, why don't you give us an overview, Harun, on how do we look at white-collar crime and also inefficiency?
Well, thank you very much, Vice Chancellor.
Can I request Nadeem that after Harun, if the time could be given to me?
Sure.
I'm to have an early exit for some.
If you are in a rush, why don't you do it before Harun? Go ahead.
No. I think let Harun do it after that.
Fine, fair enough. I'll come to you.
Okay, no, I'll be quick. So what's happening is that because of a perception and the reality both combined, Pakistan has lost lots of competitiveness, and markets don't function. People don't have faith in fair practice, and people just think that's the way business is being done in this country. And as Shoaib Saab has mentioned, so the perception of the country outside has gone down. So I will try and raise 4 points here. First of all, we have done lots of regulation or institutional developments to stop this thing. But has state become more effective after the anti-money laundering and terror financing laws, creation of NAB and others? So that's something, I think this discussion should focus on. Second is, what are the loopholes in the political institutional system which permit, inefficiencies, which lead to, space for white-collar crime? And I will give you some examples of recent sugar and wheat crisis, because I was part of the Economic Coordination Committee at that time. And finally, there is another question: is politicization and publicly giving statements against his rhetoric, does that help the economy and the country, or is it counterproductive? So let me very quickly cover some of these. I'll start with the political institutional side. So what I witnessed over the years is that, people have always, the rent seekers are always there. The collusion of crony capital kept on increasing. And let me quote very specific examples that, for instance, in the case of recent sugar crisis, which comes time and again, I felt that the ministry had not done at all its homework. It was the capability question. So what happens is that when the crushing season starts, the sugar mill owners come to the government and start blackmailing that unless you give us these prices, unless you give us export subsidy, we are not going to buy sugarcane. So the question which I'm trying to raise in this presentation is that the weakest ministries I have found were the ones which deal with business regulation. Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Food Security. Now, is it by design or is it just that it's incompetence, all over? So they were so weak that when I would ask questions, in the summary that have you done some research? What is the pricing trends globally? What happened last year? So they were totally incapable. And not only the bureaucrats, I would also highlight, if you look at the history of ministers appointed on these ministries, these are actually quite incompetent institutional setup. So that opens up space for cronyism and manipulation and dealing with it. Now, Ministry of Commerce, look at the number of SROs they issue and the protection is provided. So white collar crime, the collusion between the state institutions and the political system and the political parties which are funded by the people who actually get ill-gotten money, this whole covers this thing in the inefficiency of the state. And I would again highlight that, Dr. Nadeemul Haq and I jointly also spoke, and I'm very disappointed because in this government, when I raised the question, then when such a summary comes, can't we get, an independent view of an expert? Or can we, I even named PIDE, can we ask PIDE to do, some research before we debate on that? So there were not many takers on actually looking at evidence before we decide on this, large subjects. Second part, which I have seen, is that we politicize these things very heavily rather than looking at systemic weaknesses. And that all countries have this thing. When I was the executive director many years back of Securities and Exchange Commission, at that time, OECD countries were legally allowed to bribe up to 25% to developing countries to take a contract. And you could actually show in your balance sheet as a business promotion expense. So systematic, incentives to commit white collar crimes were there. Now we are blaming Chinese companies and others, but it has been there. It is our indigenous part to have a stronger system, how we deal with it. And that is where I see weaknesses in the regulatory system. I don't think what happens is that we have lots of emphasis on actually setting up, investigative capacity or institutions. I think in a market economy, it is the job of the regulator to have early warning signals and prevent it. And being a formal regulator, I think that's where there is a major lapse. Because once the crime is done, I think Bilal can tell us more. I don't think there is a way to get the money back. But the question is that why can't we prevent it? And that's where the inefficiency argument very rightly fit in. I would also like to mention, very quickly on political populism, because whenever I raise certain, it's a very sensitive thing when you start announcing, and there's a series of announcements, I've been part of this government has made, which has actually given wrong signals to the investors and people abroad. So we have been publicizing that it's the most corrupt country. We have been highlighting transactions like Recordec and Karke and others for political point scoring. What happens is the signal goes out, the interviews about CPEC, Recently, we spoke about pilots. I'm trying to say we need to fix our house and then announce that what changes we have done, because it does have a negative impact. Recently, somebody in France, a journalist, sent me a question that why Parliament is hesitant to debate, the concession agreement given to Chinese in Gwadar. Now, these are the things, when these are publicized in media, they backfire. And I honestly think we need institutions to deal with it, not the politicians making, loose statements about it. And one of the global level, I think, sad part is that even I was part of FATF from the UK government for a few years. Even though FATF itself has been politicized by international players, started with India, and then, the US called a press conference, and I won't go into detail, but the IMF program here had very clear political strings with the FATF process. So overall, I think politicizing white collar crime does not help, any economy. In the closing, I will make 5 suggestions, no details. I think there is very little understanding of conflict of interest, and there should be a lot more debate at the political level and the public level. And I think PIDE can do something on ethics in doing business and, conflict of interest. There's an utter confusion. I remember when Saida Warsi was a minister, she had a businessman friend flying with her in the plane, and she had to resign. But here, we get planes from the businessman and go across the globe. And we think it's very normal. So I think conflict of interest needs to be understood in a much better manner. Hold regulators responsible and strengthen them. That's my second, so that preventive measures can be taken and more research is needed. I think we need to empower compliance offices. At the moment, the anti-money laundering unit or the terror financing unit, they are mostly a recommendatory bodies. They have little teeth for compliance. We should stop glamorizing it. Media glamorizes it so much, the white collar crime, as if, this is something, movies are being made, and that is not helping the society in the fact. And finally, and very critical, is that knowledge partnerships with other jurisdictions is extremely critical, particularly in the region, so that we share best practices. And at this point in time, in the region, China, Qatar, Pakistan, everybody is dealing with some kind of, pressure to deal with that. So these are 4 or 5 areas of research in future and further debate, which I wanted to highlight, and I'll stop here.
I think very interesting points, Bilal Sab. Let me come to you, but let me ask you a very simple question, Bilal Sab. I think law and lawyers are not innocent in this process. After all, it is the lawyers who manage to get the white-collar criminals a stay and get them out of convictions, and we've seen that done many times. And I'm reading a book recently on the Code of Capital, which is talking about how law is responsible for a lot of problems. So can you please highlight what it in a legal and judicial system that helps criminals, and how we are tightening up these procedures, writing new laws that are also helping us achieve more inefficiency and more crime?
Thank you very much, Nadeem Saab. It is an honor to be part of an August panel of this nature. Well, on white-collar crime, individual cases, one can spend almost a full day on this, and on the role of lawyers as well. But I think one point that you have picked up for this discussion is inefficiency. And I would like to start my little submissions on that. Inefficiency is either genuine or it is deliberate. I will divide that in 2 parts. So someone could be genuinely inefficient, wrongly conducted or brought into the bureaucracy or in the service of Pakistan at any level. And we have to live with him, and there are mechanisms within the system. A genuinely inefficient person creates quite serious problems in terms of delaying decision-making process and everything. And then there is a deliberate inefficiency. Deliberate inefficiency is on account of fear of inquiries, on fear of criminal liability, on account of fear that the traditional indemnity of good faith actions which were given which are traditionally given to all people who are in the service of Pakistan, is not available. So therefore, we also notice that civil servants in the hierarchy, in the federal government, choose to be sometimes deliberately inefficient to avoid the responsibility of decision-making process, so that inquiries are not opened against them for that matter. It is this deliberate inefficiency that I am more worried about. Because frankly, I mean, I don't know how you look at the bureaucracy of the country. Some of the people in the bureaucracy are outstanding. I mean, in terms of their experience, in terms of their work, in terms of the investment of the state on them over a period of time, in fellowship programs, in various courses that they attend globally at the best venues in the world, and they come back to serve the country. A state invests over 30 years of training on them and 30 years of exposure. And then when they are ready to take a decision at an additional secretary level, at a secretary level, they begin to abstain on, on a fear that if there is a good faith action that they have taken, it can be misread as a misuse of authority. And I have seen this over and over again when I speak informally to people, whether I'm giving a talk or informally with friends in bureaucracy. It turns out that most of these are deliberately inefficient uh, attitudes developing in order to make sure that they are not open to inquiries in others. They're able to say, well, during my tenure, we did nothing. That's quite a dangerous development from an economic development point of view. No one else better than you understands the benefit of quick decision-making process. And I think files are referred here and there and etc. So I think one aspect that needs to be looked at is the revival of indemnity of a civil servant, which was traditionally promised to him under Civil Servants Act for his good faith actions. That traditional sovereignty, that traditional indemnity is given to all branches of people who are in the service of Pakistan, whether they are army, whether they are judges, whether they are civil servants. So if a military man by pure accident kills someone and has ancillary damage, no FIR can be registered against him till federal government approves. So here's an indemnity. A judge takes a life from a man due to his judgment. He transfers properties from X to Y. No one sues him because there is a traditional indemnity given to a judge under a specific law. The statute which says you can't sue a judge. But for a civil servant, we only have, I think, 27A of the Civil Servants Act, which talks about a good faith action stand protected. But I've never seen in any of the case law, in the Supreme Court or the High Court, interpretation of the good faith indemnity coming to the rescue of a civil servant, and a simpliciter misuse or any initiative is then viewed as a criminal offense based on which he is then prosecuted or eventually acquitted, or as the case may be, whatever the evidence is. So I think there's in terms of what we need to do in terms of going forward is to rehabilitate that good faith action. I think superior courts are partially responsible for that as well, because they have also watered down this good faith indemnity. And I see some of my own contemporaries in government college, some of the brightest people that we studied with, roll of honor, topping the, and when they sit in official meetings, they're absolutely quiet. They just don't want to share. They don't want their names to be recorded, minutes of meeting in order. They are not held responsible for that. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of inefficiency is that when the federal government, as you know, Article 99 says federal government means federal ministries, period, full stop. Now, the statutory bodies, which are creation of the parliament, over 250 plus, and apart from at the federal level and provincial level, they are not federal government. They are boards are established in those organizations, and those boards make appointments of chief executive, or they provide a mechanism, or sometimes through a recommendation of the federal government, depending upon what is an exact provision written in the statute of that organization, whether it's PUF, whether it's PIA, whether it's civil aviation, whether it's Qaid-e-Azam University, whether it's PIDE, whether it's whatever. If you are a creation of a statute, there's a board which manages you, and that board determines. Now the issue is picking up the right people to head those statutory bodies, because the federal government has offloaded its functions on these bodies because it just can't do everything. So while there is, and if there's an overlap, that overlap can be a disaster for decision-making process. So if there is a Ministry of Railways and then there is a Railway Act which controls the board and everything, you have two sets of people taking decisions, and two sets of, based on those decisions, issues are challenged before the courts. Supreme Court, and we have seen that one cadre being given superiority over the other cadre under management principles. If the engine drivers are to be ruled or governed by the ticket by the people sitting in the headquarters, they become senior to them, they don't listen to them, and you have a chaos of management. If you want to correct any chaos given in any statutory body, you have to pick the right people. Now that is where identifying efficiency becomes so significant. Now, I am told a lot of RFPs have been issued on small matters. One of the secretaries I interacted with only yesterday told me under his ministry there are about 12 statutory bodies, and they cannot make up their mind because of technicalities involved and associated with the possible inquiries. So each time they issue an advertisement, they recall it. Each time they issue an RFP, they recall it. What's happening? The whole body and its functions is suffering enormously, so much so that complete inaction, and some of those entities are so are basically of comprising of experts who can deliver in their specialized fields. The federal government is on day-to-day fighting basis. So that's my second important point, that there is a need for bringing in fast-track efficiency and further preventing those who choose, including the boards, for the good faith actions. The third is we are in a very unique setting globally. I know you know somebody at Harvard, he knows someone in Cornell, and then the Prime Minister says, and somebody else says, or Chief Minister says, we want to run this particular program. Do you know of someone? And you say, yes, that particular individual can deliver. So you bring him in. Now you need to take him to the conveyor belt of the entire procedures. That's fine. But shouldn't we give greater flexibility to the board members of these statutory bodies and take them out from the domain of PEMRA, so that give them the responsibility to choose the person, give them the responsibility for the outcome, and the failure after 1 year reviewed by the relevant ministry, and out you go. So I think efficiency is more important to me right now as of where we stand as of. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the broad legality and the legitimacy of the anti-corruption drive. I have been part of the negotiation process of the UN Convention on Corruption. And I know even then there was an extensive debate, and that debate continuously happens in all jurisdictions in the world. Should we go after corrupt people, or should we allow the businesses to prosper? Because the other entity that needs to be given some degree of support, if not protection, are the entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs, private sector runs the wheel of economy in conjunction with the federal government or with the statutory bodies. Now, if entrepreneur is put in a state of serious fear, we have a serious situation, because then we do not know which mind will conceive of what project. We need people who can conceive, put money, have ideas, have business sense and business acumen, which is extremely a rare commodity. I and you may not be excellent businessmen. You may be an economist, I may be a lawyer. We both may be advising a businessman, but the way he operates, the way he takes decisions is a highly separate, elusive quality, and we need to protect these people. That is the reason Quaid-e-Azam handpicked some of the top families that he believed will excel in business. People like Adamjis were asked to look after insurance. Seth Habib was asked to look after banking. Awaris were asked to look at hospitalities, because Quaid-e-Azam knew that there's a special way entrepreneurship quality that we need that everyone cannot do. So we need to protect people who contribute in the economy of Pakistan. We need to tighten things up around them through regulators. But we need to also know that, giving them a protection, if you want to improve your influence in Afghanistan, to me, the best way is to declare Afghanistan a duty-free zone and let your investment businessmen go in Afghanistan and invest. That's an easy way to set off the influence of any other entity. So I think that is also important, that protection of an entrepreneur, because as one entrepreneur in Lahore who was discussing this issue with me, that while we are putting money at the same time, because उसने मुझे कहा in Urdu कि सर आप हैंड ब्रेक खींच के एक्सीलेटर दबा रहे हैं, उससे इंजन गर्म हो गया मुल्क का, तो आपने हैंड ब्रेक खींची हुई है और अकाउंटेबिलिटी की, और साथ एक्सीलेटर पे पैर फुल दे रहे हैं कि इकोनॉमी आगे क्यों नहीं चल रही, तो उससे तो सर इंजन हीट अप. I thought that was a very interesting and a simplified way of putting across. So जिस तरह ایک ڈاکٹر ہے, he has to decide کہ which medicine has to be administered. چار مرض ہیں. میرا اپنا پی این تھا, he hit a موٹر بائک ایکسیڈنٹ نہر پر, تو اس کا برین بھی ڈیمیج ہوا, گوڑا بھی ڈیمیج ہوا. اب وہ گوڑے میں اس کی چیخیں وہ مار رہا ہے, تو اس کو لے گئے ہاسپٹل میں. ڈاکٹر سیٹ کہ جی اس کو یہ چیخیں مارنے دیں, پہلے میں نے اس کے دماغ کو واچ کرنا ہے, مانیٹر کرنا ہے کہ کوئی ڈیمیج برین تو نہیں ہو گیا, تو میں 3 دن یہ مانیٹرنگ پہ سسپینڈ کروں گا. اچھا ہم سارے کہہ رہے ہیں جناب وہ گوڑے کی وجہ سے اس کی چیخیں نکل رہی ہیں, اس نے کہا نو. So that's where the doctor stepped out and explained to us, yeah, there's a mechanism, there's sequence of giving medication, there's sequence of treating diseases that a good doctor follows. تو یہ میں نہیں کہہ رہا ہوں کہ اس کے گھٹنے میں درد نہیں ہے, یا یہ مجھے نظر آ رہا آپ کو بندہ چیخیں مار رہا ہے, یہ بھی ضروری ہے, لیکن اس سے زیادہ ضروری ہے کہ اس کا برین ٹھیک کام کر رہا ہے کہ نہیں کر رہا. So I think what we have to say, whether between white collar crime and efficiency and economy, we have to follow the advice of that doctor, which who said کہ آپ اپنا سیکوینس تو صحیح کر لیں پہلے, کہ آپ نے کس چیز کو پہلے ایڈریس کرنا ہے. یہ نہ دماغ بیٹھ جائے تو گوڑے کی چیخیں سمیت بندہ فارغ ہو جائے گا. سو میرا یہ خیال ہے کہ, اور اسی طرح جو ایک لیگیلٹی اور لیجیٹمیسی کا کانسیپٹ ایسوسیٹ ہوتی ہے کسی بھی اکاؤنٹیبلٹی ڈرائیو کے ساتھ, وہ اس میں ایک بڑی کرٹیکل چیز ہے کہ لیگلی اٹ شوڈ بی کریکٹ اینڈ دیر شوڈ بی اے پبلک لیجیٹمیسی ٹو اٹ. لیگیلٹی اینڈ لیجیٹمیسی walk hand in hand, چاہے وہ ملٹری آپریشن ہو, چاہے وہ جوڈیشل کام ہو. اچھا اس کی لیگیلٹی تو آپ بنا لیں گے کہ آپ کے پاس لا ہے, اس کے نیچے آپ نے آرمی ایکٹ کے نیچے ایکشن کر لیا, بٹ آر دا لوکلز آلسو انجوائنگ اٹ, ان سے آر دے ریسیونگ اے پازیٹیو فیڈ بیک. اگر وہ بھی سپورٹ کر رہے ہیں فبیہا, ایکسیلنٹ. سپریم کورٹ اگر ایک ایسی ججمنٹ دے رہا ہے جو لیگلی کریکٹ ہے لیکن اس کی لیجیٹمیسی نہیں ہے, تو وی ہیو اے پرابلم. لیکن اگر ایسی ججمنٹ دے رہا ہے جس کی لوگوں میں بھی سپورٹ ہے, تو اس کی لیگیلٹی بھی ہے اور لیجیٹمیسی بھی ہے. یہی فارمولا اپلائی کرے گا جو پروسیس آف اکاؤنٹیبلٹی ہے, کہ اس کی لیگیلٹی بھی آپ, ہم تو سمجھ رہے ہیں کہ اس کی لیگیلٹی کے بھی سیریس ایشوز ہیں, ایویڈنس کی, جس طرح انہوں نے بات کی, آپ سے مجھ سے پوچھا کہ بیل کرا لیتے ہیں, تو وہ لیگیلٹی کے ایشو, لیگیلٹی کی باسکٹ میں فال کر رہے ہیں کہ یہ لیگل پراپر بنا نہیں بنا, انویسٹیگیشن صحیح ہوئی نہیں ہوئی, کون تھا, کتنے وٹنس آئے, ایگزیبٹ صحیح تھے, کراس ایگزامینیشن صحیح ہوا, یہ لیگیلٹی کے ایشو ہیں. لیجیٹمیسی پر پرسپشن کیا ہے, وہ بھی ایک اہم سوال ہے, اور اس کو بھی دیکھنا چاہیے before we address all these issues. So میرا یہ خیال ہے کہ I'll sum it up by saying کہ جو ہمارا efficiency ہے, that to me is an important point, and number of reasons why people جو انیشیٹو ہم نہیں لے پا رہے, اس کی بہت بڑی وجہ انٹرپرینیورز کا اسکیئر ہے. انٹرپرینیور جب تک ٹیم اپ نہیں کرے گا سول سرونٹ کے ساتھ, ایفیشینٹ سول سرونٹ کے ساتھ, یو ول ناٹ کنورٹ اینی تھنگ انٹو اے پروجیکٹ. چاہے وہ آپ نے اکنامک اسٹیٹ بنانی ہو, چاہے کارخانہ لگانا ہو, چاہے بلڈنگ کا کانسیپٹ کنسیو کرنا ہو, وہ نہیں ہوگا. سو آئی تھنک یہ چیزیں بیلنس کرنی ضروری ہیں. اینڈ باقی تو لا از ویری کلیئر, آئی تھنک پیپل آر ویری کلیئر اباؤٹ دی offenses and its frameworks and how it should be done. So I'll stop here for the time being. Thank you, Nareem. I can't hear you.
Sorry,
Can't
my
hear
mistake.
you.
My mistake again. Bilal Sahab, thank you very much. I think that was a very good summary. And your analogy about the doctor is very well taken. And your analogy about entrepreneurs being scared is very well taken. I think I'll turn to Ehsan Sadiq Sahab. Ehsan Sadiq Sahab, if I say to you as an ordinary Pakistani that there is no corruption in Pakistan, because quite frankly, I have seen nothing proven. I've seen a lot of claims. I've seen a lot of TV shows. I've seen a lot of accusations, but so far nothing has been proven. Would I be wrong? And why is it that you guys are not able to prove anything? And secondly, what about the point that Bilal Sahab has raised? That if you scare everybody into death, how can we function then as a society? Ehsan Sahab, over to you. Ehsan Sadiq Sahab.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
First of all, let me thank the organizer for inviting me. I am very honored to be part of this very distinguished panel, especially in the presence of Dr. Shoaib Sadam, who has been my inspiration, my mentor, and professionally, whatever I've learned from him, from ASP under training till this day. So I am both honored and awed by his presence. So Now coming to the two very pertinent issues that you have raised. First is the efficacy of the regime that is in place to respond to the corruption cases and in curtailing it, in preventing it. And second is with regard to Bilal Sufi Sahib. I think the point Amr Bilal Sufi Sahib has raised, I would like to take first, very important. This fine balance to create and this tightrope you have to walk is the most important issue, I think, facing the white-collar crime investigation agencies. How to curb white-collar crime and fight it and investigate it without scaring the business environment. We have seen in recent past its implication. So this fine balance has to be created, and I think we're not incognizant of this issue. I'll come to this a little later. But I think the tone has been production. If the society as a whole, if the culture whole, whether it's bureaucratic or political culture, there is an acceptability for corruption or white collar crime. So our job investigators becomes a little bit difficult. So it has to be contextualized work before we pass any verdict on our efficacy in the political economy of the state. So if we can draw a comparison with other states which are higher in transparency index or their systems are more effective, there are some fine distinction that you can see. And so we have to see if our actions have implications in the power sector, in the energy sector, or whether we can the would-be investors or what kind of business-friendly environment that the government in the larger strategic framework is trying to create. I stop here because then I think I would be overstepping my domain and going to other debate for which other panelists are rightfully here.
Thank you very
much. Let me,
sir,
first of all, but I want to, if you allow me, if you desire, I just wanted to acquaint the audience with the regime that is in place to counter or respond to white-collar crimes. So you want me to continue?
Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, we have to understand what kind of the institutional framework is in place. Basically, we have three agencies. First is, as we all know, NAB, and then the FIA, where I'm working currently, and at provincial level, there is anti-corruption establishments. Now, the distinction between these three agencies and those is quite glaring. First of all, NAB has, in terms of jurisdiction, it has a much wider jurisdiction as compared to FIA and anti-corruption establishments. Anti-corruption establishments deal with provincial public servants, while FIA deals with federal public servants and matters connected to the federal government. And it may on the federal departments, federal corporations, or any other matter that is connected to the federal government's affairs, and that is to on our schedule. So this is a FIA and anti-corruption establishment. But NAB has much wider jurisdiction in terms of taking up any case. It can be an autonomous body, it can be a private corporation, it can be a housing society, it can be an investment company, it can be a cooperative society. It can be a local body, it can be a provincial. So anything which relates to any grievance raised by citizens of Pakistan. So its jurisdiction is much broader and much wider as compared to other agencies. Similarly, because this is very important that we understand this, that NAB has, under NAB ordinance, much wider powers to enable it to effectively investigate these cases. And first of all, the chairman's appointment itself is under a statutory provision of law. And it's not just an administrative appointment. So it gives it a lot of autonomy as any white collar special powers in regard to demand. FI, anti-corruption establishment, we have just 14. Days of
I think voice is breaking. Why don't we switch off the video?
वीडियो स्विच ऑफ कर दें जी, फिर शायद वॉइस बेहतर आ जाए.
Similarly, NAB we assess for 15 days, and in FIA we have very limited powers to that effect. There are other to NAB and ACA and FIA, but I'll not patient. I will come to know some of the issues which you earlier asked, like what is the our convictions and why it is not with regard to investigation of the cases as well as the prosecution of the cases. First of all, we have to understand that the investigation white collar accounts, and there were around 1,000 account holders, and there were around 60 STRs which we had to investigate, and all this lot of work months with a team of 50 to complete a preliminary investigation. So this is the scale of these investigations, and when it goes into trial, so it can take years. So much things involved in, and they are also, as I said, time and resource intensive. You need a lot of human resource, a lot of financial support as well. So you can't complete in, like you do in normal police work very quickly in 14 days or 30 days. It will take, and it Pakistan, it is everything in the world. Then there are capacity issues, as this issue has been highlighted by Dr. Sotasal, with regard to investigators and also prosecutors and judges, and with regard to collection of evidence, preservation, its presentation, and its appreciation. So there are serious issues, and this is again not something very unique to us. There are these issues. Some of the issues pertain to fact that the defense side has the facility of hiring very top-notch lawyers as compared to our prosecutors, who are not only overburdened, but their exposure in such cases is their positioning is not as such as the defense lawyers. There are issues regard to witnesses' appearances and their protection. So we do have some provision in some laws, but we don't have any comprehensive framework for witness protection, which is a very important component of any counter anti-white collar crime strategy anywhere in the world. If I have time, I can take another few minutes to elaborate on what we have done to strengthen the legal framework, and then what is the way forward.
इस पे आ जाएंगे जी. We'll come after the questions. ठीक है जी.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Sansab. Thank you very much. Very kind of you. We've also got Azhar Nadeem Saab, who's a former IG of police, who's joined us here. Azhar Saab, what's your take on white collar crime? Is it something we should worry about? And if so, what are you doing about it? Azhar Saab, go ahead. You were going to ask a question, comment. Ji, boliye.
My comment is that Bilal Sufi Saab has very ably pointed out the causes of deliberate efficiency and the efficiency which is genuine efficiency. These are the main causes for the white collar crime not being checked properly in this country. No, there has been, I do agree with this thing that there has been this thing that this white collar crime is played on the TV screens and all that. But that is also important from the point of view that there must be some awareness on part of the people about it. But the thing is that this deliberate efficiency problem is to be resolved. And by that can be done only by giving some sort of protection to the bureaucrats who take bold decisions. Those who take decisions, they then suffer also. And they suffer unnecessarily. This should also be resolved, I think. That is the main problem in my view.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Taqir Saab, Taqir Ahmed, security analyst. Bataiye, what do you want to say, ji? Taqir Saab? Taqir Saab can't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Go ahead, ji.
Can you hear me?
Ji, bilkul.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum, Nadeem Saab. Thank you very much.
Ji.
Thank you for Dr. Shoaib Sadal and Ahsan Sadiq Saab. I know them all. I've been serving also in different polices and doing project for Pakistan law enforcement training. The question is, what we are looking for is a political influence, which we have to avoid, first of all. Secondly, we have to get political will for reforms, either they are judicial, police, or jail reforms. Unless there is no political will, unless there are no funds available, we cannot do anything in this country. We'll be running behind the light of a truck. And I think Dr. Shoaib Sadal knows about it. We have been talking a lot on this, on different seminars. So my question is, what are the hurdles? Is present government is prepared to do the reforms, or just is this for the public consumption? Those speeches which are being made are just for the public consumption. Thank you.
Acha ji, Hamid Sharif Saab? Hamid Sharif, can you hear me?
Yes, just give me a second. Thank you very much, Nadeem. Pleasure to be here. First of all, I think, we can talk about this subject until the cows come home. I think this is such a ripe subject. I know it can go in many directions, and there's so many dimensions of it. I think what is really important is that we have some sense of priority. In Pakistan, the economy, as you know, is largely the government. Most procurement, most economic activity goes back to the government. So unless you fix the government, you don't begin to solve this problem. And that's why I agree with Dr. Shoaib Saab, and I think Harun was also alluding to that, that you have to get your government working. And I think you also made the comment that perhaps in Pakistan, as much as corruption, incompetence is also an issue. And that's, I'm a witness to that at various levels. So I think, civil service reform, which has been, talked about for the last 15, 20 years, is something no one wants to get serious about. This government has had a commission which is just going on and on and on. We've yet to see any decent output from that. So I think a civil service reform which holds civil servants accountable is extremely important. I'm speaking from China. I've lived here since last 8 years. And one of the reasons why the system here works is because there's accountability at every single stage. You simply don't get promoted until you deliver. And in our system, once you've entered the hallowed civil service, you just have to breathe in order to get promoted. So there is no system of accountability. And I think, if you have to prioritize, I would say that this is a very, very high priority. Serious civil service reform in which people are held accountable, and there are targets every year which people have to meet. Without that, you don't even begin to scratch the surface. My second one, and again, it comes from my experience as head of procurement while I was at the Asian Development Bank. We carried out one study which showed that if most countries could actually bring efficiency to their procurement methods, the amount of savings they would generate is actually far greater than all the aid and loans which they get from multilateral and bilateral donors. And Pakistan is no exception to that. It really puzzles me. Well, it doesn't puzzle me, I know exactly why, but it's shocking that nobody talks about serious procurement reform. In an age when we have electronic procurement, and you can really cut out a lot of this wheeling dealing which takes place. I visited Seoul some years back, and I was given a demonstration of the Korean system, where you sit at a terminal and within about 10 minutes you settle major procurement decisions. So I just want to float these two ideas. I think we can talk about judicial reform, police reform, etc. But I think we have to prioritize, and I would at this juncture say civil service reform for some they're difficult reform, but they have to be done. For some quick wins, some procurement reform. And of course, judicial and police reforms are there, but I think they are very complicated, will take some time. Thank you very much.
But Hamid Sahab, I have a problem here. The World Bank did help us put in PEPRA, and we've got PEPRA. And I know that, for example, in PIDE, which is an institution of no consequence, we are trying to buy 5 tablets to do online classes. Don't get me wrong, not Apple computers, or just, these little things that you get to write on a computer as an adjunct to the computer, which cost like 10,000 rupees. And we've gone through PEPRA rules for 2 weeks to buy this. So we've got a PEPRA system, which is very robust. And we're buying these tablets for 33,000 when they're in the market, they're for 18, but we've followed PEPRA. So we are now absolved of any problem. So that exists too. You want to say anything?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think the problem with Pakistan is, and again, I've worked for donors or multilateral development banks for the last 20 years. The problem is, and I've said this internally in discussions, anyone from an MDB can go to Pakistan and sell the Pakistani bureaucracy any teddy bears they want.
Yeah.
Because there is nobody home on the other side. There's nobody who can engage with you. So some guy, I don't know the history of PEPRA, except the World Bank did it. But probably some junior World Bank guy came along and sold the PEPRA idea, which it sold in Latin America, and he brought it along here, and there's nobody home in any of the ministries to engage with him or her, and therefore you get the sort of abuse you do. But if we engage with this, I'm sure we can come up with a procurement system which will deliver us efficiency in all respects, in time and in terms of value. Thank you.
Appreciate it. We should take ownership of our own stuff. Tahir Dhinsa Sahab. Tahir Dhinsa.
Can you hear me?
Ji, go ahead.
Very simply, once again, as a layman, Dr. Shoaib Sadal is an expert, and Ehsan Sadiq Sahab also, and other people are, I understand the panel is very good. But you see, first time when a political government was caught, no less than Bill Clinton rescued them. Once again, a Qatari aircraft rescued them. The thing is, the white collar crimes are, they are very powerful people, and they are rescued by the international establishment. And as long as it hangs between the balance, it's continued. Very quick example of Indus Water Treaty. When the treaty was done, India was made to pay 20% of the cost of the treaty, of the infrastructure that was built in Pakistan. Because we were the darling of the West, we enjoy the influence. Now it has swung to the other side. And now the same people come here and they say, don't build a dam, replenish your aquifer. And the same people, I personally know, they go to India and say, build a dam there. They want that water should be, as long because the rain pattern due to climate change has changed, and the western system is getting more precipitation than the eastern system in all that. I mean, it has to be top down, has to be settled at the top. Otherwise, these are all very good people. They are have integrity. That's my
fair point. Sara Nizamani. Sara Nizamani. Has she gone? Okay.
Hello, sir. Assalamu
Go
alaikum.
ahead. Ji, Sara.
I'm here. My name is Sara Nizamani, and I'm a research scholar at Applied Economics Research Center. I have a basic question regarding the characterization of a white-collar crime. Just earlier in the presentation, we were told that white-collar crime is characterized as non-violent, it is financially motivated, and it is committed by business and government professionals. But is white-collar crime really non-violent? Coming from the article from the News International, the government of Pakistan buys goods and services worth $60 billion or 7.5 trillion rupees every year. Estimates vary, but around 50% of the 7.5 trillion rupees is drawn off by white-collar crimes. Similarly, 290,000 newborns in Pakistan die every year before the end of their first month. 175,000 Pakistani children die annually due to premature birth, and 53,000 Pakistani children die because of diarrhea caused by the contaminated water every year. Pakistan is the riskiest country for newborn, riskiest in the world. Also, taking the example of New Islamabad Airport, which was originally was to be built on the cost of 23 billion, the total amount spent was 100 billion. That's an extra 77 billion. To conceptualize the 77 billion, we could build in 19 Shaukat Khanams, 4,500 cities and foundation schools, and teach 5 million kids in the country.
Sarah,
so how how exactly this does not fall in violence? Violence,
okay,
how not?
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. Abdul Sattar Sab. Abdul Sattar. Okay, fine, Ji. I think I'll go back to the panel with these questions. Go ahead, Ji. Who would like to speak first? Shoaib Sab, why don't you start? Shoaib Sab? Shoaib Sadul Sab? Okay, Amir Bilal Sufi. I don't know what's happening here. Can you hear me? Ji Shoaib Sab, go ahead. Ji Shoaib Sab.
I think several issues have been raised. I'll briefly touch upon them. One was by Mr. Azhar Nadeem, and basically it was about protection to the civil servants. There has been a debate in this country that the civil servants should be given constitutional protection, and a great injustice was done in 1973 when this protection was withdrawn. I have a different view, honestly. My view is that even after 73, we need to look at the statistics. How many civil servants, or particularly senior civil servants, have been actually dismissed or have been actually, dealt with under departmental proceedings? Hardly any. So I think this rhetoric has to be placed in the proper context. I entirely agree that civil servants, like others, should have protection, but protection against not doing loot and plunder. protection against doing the right job for which they are recruited. So then Hamid Sharif Saab, I think he raised a very important issue about this procurement. We all have done procurements in our service. You know, I can give you a brief, you know, personal experience. As young ASP, I did some procurement in Gujranwala, uniforms of the force, at a price which was, you know, 40% less than at the price at which the uniforms had been purchased a year earlier, and of a much better quality. And 4 years later, I was SP in Balochistan. I received, you know, a letter saying that I had violated the codal formalities, and so I should refund the money. And I replied back, I said, yes, I know I have committed a great crime by giving the state saving of 40% and giving the constabulary a better uniform. But I'm afraid I will continue to do this sort of crime in my entire career. So please go ahead if you want to take me to whatever. Anyhow, nobody came back to me. But the point is, this whole, you know, nonsense of 3 quotations and, you know, it is our everyday experience that if the bureaucracy is trusted, and obviously they have to come up to that trust level, if they are trusted, we will not be, you know, short of funds. At least, you know, 50 to 100% of whatever we spend can be saved, you know. So at the moment, we are not into this that, you know, I keep telling people that, look, you should purchase things, procure things for the government as if you are doing it for your own home. That is the basic principle. And if you follow that principle, that's okay. You know, nothing else is required. But nobody wants to do that. What we want to do is to fulfill these so-called, you know, codal formalities. And codal formality says 3 quotations. Maybe you have, you know, got those printed yourself. And then the lowest one should get the, you know, order. So it is a issue of trust also. Those who have read Reinventing America by Al Gore will agree with me that, you know, he said the main problem with our system is that we don't trust our bureaucrats. But obviously the bureaucrats have to be, you know, not only efficient, but they have to be fair in their dealings. They have to be, you know, of certain integrity levels and so on and so forth. So that is, you know, what is important. Then the issue of performance was also raised. Again, let me share with you my own experience. I went to see my counterpart in Beijing when I was heading the intelligence bureau, you know, and I was amazed what he told me. He said, Dr. Sadal, our system is based entirely on performance. Maybe he said, even at the lowest level, if people having, say, master's degree or PhDs, they come and want to join, we say, okay, we'll give you 2 or 3 extra, you know, increments, but you will have to join at the bottom, say in our parlance in grade 1, and then rise to the top. He said there are people who have risen to the top in, say, 20 to 25 years, maybe earlier. He said, I have the authority to reward people up to 3 salaries I can, give reward every year to those who are, more efficient. But a PhD may retire at the bottom if he is inefficient. So, I mean, there are good practices available, or at least practices which we need to study and try to then apply them, in our context. Obviously, total replication is not always possible because of different societal systems. But what we are having at the moment is now completely outdated. It has outlived its utility. And in fact, it has become a panacea for doing nothing, for loot and plunder, and keep saying that, it is NAB, which is hindrance. NAB also needs reforms, no doubt. NAB also needs internal accountability, But saying that there should be no NAB, for example, or NAB and state cannot coexist, I think there is no country, at least, which I'm aware of, where there is no NAB or, Tahir Saab mentioned about, Qataris and Bill Clinton. Yes, he's right, but how will we get free? We go to them. They don't ask us to we run towards them when we want to, get out of any problem. And since we have developed good relations, not only between us and our counterparts, but between our, spouses and kids and whatnot, at the state expense. All those, the gifts that we exchange, we can't afford, this country can't afford. But we keep doing it as a routine, and that is how we win over the others to come to our rescue when needed. Sarah raised an issue about whether WCC is really nonviolent. Well, in the context which she was putting it, it is not nonviolent. Because if, because of that loot and plunder which goes on every day, our hospitals are, not up to the mark. Our schools, are failing to provide quality education. She mentioned the quality of water and so on and so forth. That is actually, it is a white collar crime is a silent killer, The sense in which it is said that it is not violent is that, maybe if you shoot at somebody, there is a victim, that victim is immediately taken to hospital and, processed by the police. But here the victims are in millions, sometimes even hundreds of millions. So that is a peculiarity of white collar crime. But it is not at all non-violent in that sense in which, she said. I think this is what I had noted, but if I have not covered any particular point, please let me know and I'll be more than happy. And I see Adil Najam Saab and Amar Durrani Saab and, others. We are really honored, Shahid Khan Saab, that they are Zahadin Saab, that they have given their time, and we are here to sort of, in fact, learn from them. It's such a vast topic, and there are so many different angles.
मैं एक छोटी सी चीज आपसे पूछ लूं. You mentioned this thing about white collar crime and, you know, the fact civil servants should get indemnity and they should not be penalized. Let me ask you a simple question. We've lost 5.5 trillion rupees in the energy sector over the last 12 years. Is that a crime? Is anybody responsible for that? Or are we just supposed to forget it? It doesn't matter. We've lost 5.5 trillion. It's okay. Similarly, we've lost $7 billion in Recodic. Is that a crime? Is anybody responsible? So, I mean, I hear you guys talking about white collar crime, but I'm a little concerned that we lose billions of rupees, as Sarah mentioned, Islamabad airport, or for example, Mangla Racing, or for example, Neelam Jhelum. I mean, many of these things, the way I look at them, are inefficiency, they're not crimes. And yet we don't hold inefficiency as a problem at all. So who do we hold responsible for these things? Or is there nobody responsible?
No. I fully agree. Although, you know, the counter view is that these are two different things, inefficiency and white collar crime. But as I said, that inefficiency is also dealt with through civil penalties. And
who is responsible for the 5.5 trillion loss in energy?
Well, at the end of the day, it is the government of the day which should be held responsible.
But
you
that's
know,
too diffuse.
Sorry?
That's too diffuse, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is this sort of diffusion, you know, which provides a shield, you know. So, because if you want to really go after the true culprits, then you have to have good investigators. You need to have, you know, people of conscience who can become witnesses. You need to have good prosecutors, and but the examples which you are given, you know, I absolutely agree with you that it is not only you know a crime, but these are the mega crimes which you have mentioned. And I know a couple of cases, you know, where when you are drafting a contract, especially with the foreign governments, you, out of corruption or out of connivance with the other side or whatever, you leave a small print, you know, in their favor. And that is what leads to what happened in Recodic or, you know, elsewhere. Every international case we lose. What is the problem?
You know, let's bring in Bilal Sufi Saab. Bilal Sufi Saab, can you please tell us that when, for example, we lose these international arbitration cases, or for example, I'll go further. There is this Sheraton in Karachi that has been lying there for the last 40 or 50 years, which is in dispute, and the courts still haven't decided. There is this international hotel lying in Lahore, which is still vacant. As far as I'm concerned, as an economist, it has a huge opportunity cost. We are losing money because the courts are not working. Then the courts take decisions, crazy decisions like pricing sugar and all these things. Bilal Sab, do we hold that as a problem as well, or is it just simply looking for corruption?
Unknown caller.
Is Bilal Sab gone, or is he there? Bilal Sufi? I think Bilal Sufi is gone. So Haroon, can you take up that question, please?
Let me try and answer a couple of these points, including this one. I think first of all, if you recall in one of my recent seminars, when we talk about civil service reform or procurement reform, Hamid is absolutely right that you need to prioritize. But I'm trying to say that civil service reform is such a big thing. Pakistan needs to tell its people that these are the two things we are going to implement. The faith of the people in both state and institutions has really gone down, and that has come in the discussion. So we need to demonstrate through performance that we can do something. Let me give you an example of procurement. So we committed to, you know, interested parties that we will privatize some LNG plants in 1 year. Today, exactly, it's been 25th month, and the process is still going on. So there's a cost to it as well. People stop trusting you that you can actually do transactions efficiently. Now coming to leakages, I think we need to again look at leakages from two angles. A lot of people look at leakages when the crime is done. So you need to investigate and punish so that it doesn't happen again. I'm saying that the capacity of state to actually gauge early warning signals is very, very low. At times, I was scared when these huge decisions were taken without any evidence, without any research, without looking at best practices in the world. So I think early warning signals, that's where I highlighted the role of regulators. So what I would suggest to this forum here is that perhaps insofar as procurement is concerned, there are world-class procurement systems where human touch is not involved. You can buy your, I think, tablets online and satisfying the law. The moment the human touch comes in, the cost and the corruption, the leakages and everything goes up. It will take long time to fix our, reforms of the people at the customs, at every level in procurement. But if we automate it, and I give you one example, 20 years back, Khalid Mirza and I did a small thing. There is a very small thing when you register a firm, you need to do name search. We put all the names of the companies on websites so that people could search. So the people who protested against it were actually the chartered accountants and consultants who were charging a heavy amount to people just to find them a name of the company. So I think for countries like Pakistan, we need to see practices where we have managed to eliminate the human touch and deregulate lots of activity. In terms of wastage, what you have mentioned, the Sheraton, the airport, and the other projects, that is directly linked to three things. One is the understanding and efficiency. Second, lack of systems to do it. And I also say, in fact, accountability, I don't see like I have worked for 10 years in Whitehall. There's a protection to a secretary. That's why secretary is called permanent secretary. But at the same time, the delegation of power at all stages is so strong that you hold the whole system accountable. Here, usually you harass one or two people who are in the front. It is not the system which is held accountable for power sector losses, subsidies, inefficient, crony capitalism. I think if we go into the past, we will not gain anything. At this point in time, the measures of preventions need to be focused rather than just politicizing it and, getting into media that we are going gung-ho. The policing of that thing, I think it's gaining more attention. And for that, the trust is actually the national trust in our system, the people's trust in bureaucracy, and basically overall, when I look at the index, actually globally, the trust in democracy is going down, because we are failing to give efficient, timely, transparent transactions. And that should be a worry to any state for that matter.
जी, एहसान सादिक साहब, would you please tell me, पहली चीज तो ये है कि मेरा तो claim ये है, as I told you earlier, there is no corruption in Pakistan. Where is the proof of corruption? Who has been convicted yet? We've had 10 years of trials or 20 years of trials of all the political people, and so far nothing has been proven. So ये जो हमने तीन इदारे खड़े किए हुए हैं of NAB and FIA and anti-corruption, इनके क्या performance record है? एहसान सादिक साहब?
Sir, kindly unmute yourself. Sir, thank you. So coming directly to your question, again, this is very important that we should contextualize this discussion on performance of investigation agencies. First of all, there are other components, as earlier Harun Sharif Saab raised this issue, and somebody also mentioned about the prevention. You also mentioned about this 5.5 trillion loss, and here I want to bring in first, before I answer your question, that before it comes to the lack of investigators, there are regulators. They prevent and check irregularities, but also raise alerts and flags when it comes to, those irregularities becoming criminalities. I give you 2-3 examples of how our regulators have, how there have been some improvement in their working, but there have been 3 at least examples where the regulators could not. A head of bank with a criminal record was appointed, but the regulator did not raise the issue. And its appointment went higher till the time and joint inquiry team discovered that this was the irregularity committed, and the whole bank was actually captured by the people who were involved in money laundering. Secondly, we have a financial intelligence generation mechanism, but in many important money laundering cases, this forum did not and could not generate the timely STRs. Thirdly, coming to this 5.5 trillion IPP loss, there has been a study, and you might have come across that, which point out to serious lapses on part of the regulator when they were, paying them the tariff. There were wrong calculations, wrong basis of the calculations, and all those irregularities went unchecked. And then there are auditors. We here in FIA at least don't receive the reports of, there is no formal mechanism of receiving those reports from the auditors. So I think a very important issue that has been partially highlighted in earlier discussion, and I would like to highlight it all the more here, that the role of regulators must be brought under closer scrutiny, and their role must be enhanced. Similarly, earlier to that, the organization, whether it is a civil service, if it's a corporation, there should be some compliance mechanism as there are in the banks to check such irregularities, and where there is an element of criminality, it must be reported. And if in case of non-reporting, there should be some penalties. Now coming to the what we could do, against the backdrop of the difficulties that we face in investigation, let me tell you that during last 20 years, around 500 billion have been recovered. Now the headlines which you see on the TV screens or the media or the newspapers, obviously the good work can't make those headlines, and there are issues when there are some failings and there are some acquittals, but convictions obviously get less coverage. But let me also say that not only is that there is less media coverage or less public awareness about those convictions, they are very time consuming. There are trials going on for 3, 4, 5 years. So it seems that there is nothing being done. Thirdly, conviction anywhere, as I mentioned earlier, word over is a very, very difficult thing to get in such cases. I'll give you an example. In India, there is an anti-money laundering law that is in place for last 15 years. And these 15 years, they have registered 700 cases of money laundering. And out of those 700 cases, only 7 convictions have been achieved. Similarly, the UK had to promulgate an unexplained wealth order, law to overcome this issue of lower conviction and the inefficacy of the enforcement agencies, where they had to basically follow what we are doing here under NAB ordinance. And thirdly, even in a country like USA, 60% of forfeitures are based on administrative action rather than, the judicial convictions. And fifthly, they also involve a lot of ADR mechanisms, the code-based ADR in such cases. So when it comes to Pakistan, we solely focus on the investigation side. And as earlier mentioned by Dr. Shoaib Sadal Saab and other, for the panelists, these investigations are not normal investigations. As I also raised it, these are very complex, complicated, and they are planned. Not only they have implications for generations. They are very planned. For example, in one case, the whole bank was captured to facilitate money laundering. So if you are doing these crimes with such a planning, you are hiring the best auditors to ensure that your auditor checks are fine. And similarly, to evade taxes, you hire the best tax experts. You create shell companies. So all these issues, when, as Sadal Saab said, there are still traces which we as investigators go after, trace them, make linkages. But when we go to the court appreciate those evidence that set of evidence against normal criminal evidence standards. And basically in white collar crime, you have to go on the inferences rather than hardcore linking like you do in a murder case. So these are issues which hamper more probably conviction rates. And obviously courts are also inclined, if there are some defense lawyers, they point out certain gaps, and there can be certain gaps, but then the courts are inclined towards the defendants.
Fair point. Difficult, very difficult.
Last year, we three agencies recovered 150 billion in one single year.
150 billion rupees.
Yes, sir.
150 billion rupees. But at the same time, in the power sector, we lost 500 billion rupees. So I'm a little worried as to where we are debating. So let me turn to Ziauddin Saab. Ziauddin Saab, I'm going to do a little unusual thing and ask you to please tell us, you, mashallah, very venerated senior person that we all respect and love, and we've enjoyed your writings all our lives, and mashallah, you are a very good analyst and a very decent person. Please tell us, are we chasing the wrong animal, running after white collar crime? As Amir Bilal Sufi said, absolutely correct. We've got a foot on the accelerator, and while we are pulling the handbrake. Is this the way to do business? We are losing 5 trillion rupees in the power sector, 500 billion annually, and we are proud of 150 billion recovery. We've chased our politicians to death and we haven't proved anything. So Zia sir, please, your comment.
I've been listening to the experts and very highly impressive presentations. My comment about white collar crime would be, it's a very complex kind of an activity. It's like walking on the ice. The man who commits white collar crime does not leave any footprints. So that makes it very, very difficult to make the criminal accountable after the crime. So all our efforts should be on prevention. As Dr. Harun Sharif said, the regulations. See, we are practicing free market economy, and unless we use a firm kind of regulators which are not being managed by the ministries, like PEMRA is a kind of a department of information ministry. NEPRA is a department of the almost energy ministry. So these regulators should be autonomous, statutory bodies, and they should be manned by the most efficient civil servants. As Sufi Saab said, he was quoting a businessman who's supposed to have told him that you are holding the handbrake and putting pressure on the accelerator. So, handbrakes, we should not be putting but accelerators should be used rather efficiently. And for that, we have to have efficient civil servants. But as I said, we have to be very careful. I mean, we have to be putting more emphasis on prevention rather than accountability after the crime. That's my short comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sab. Adil Najam Saab, I can't let you get away with it too. Can you please tell me, when the US was growing, all these people, Stanford and the railway barons and Rockefeller, etc., they made money through all kinds of things that we now learn are not the most, moral and correct things to do. Same thing today, for example, lots of US corporations are engaging in lobbying, etc. I have a deep contention with Transparency International. I think they carve us out to be corrupt, and they don't look at the corruption in the US. There's a huge amount of corruption in the US. Your president, for example, has not declared his tax returns for the last 20 years. And mashallah, he's getting away with it thanks to lawyers, right? So the question is, are we chasing the wrong sort of light? Are we chasing corruption instead of efficiency? I'm deeply worried about the fact that we put efficiency last. We become a very moral majority kind of country. We want everybody to be honest but not do any work. Are you happy with that?
Sir, wrong light तो आपने मुझे on the spot करके कर दिए. But I really don't know much about crime, and I've tried my whole life not to know much about crime. So I had come here to learn something about it. And जहाँ मैं बैठा हूँ उस वक्त रात के 3:30 बजे में. So you shouldn't expect anything sensible coming from me. But I do think your question is dangerous. I do agree with the premise. It's a leading question. लेकिन it's a dangerous question. But I've also been thinking कि वो जो अमर बिलाल कह रहे थे ना कि brake and accelerator at the same time, Amir Durrani might know better. लेकिन actually that's sometimes not a bad thing. ये drag racers जो होते हैं, my engineering experience, if you want real acceleration, that's what you do. You press both together and then you leave the brake and then the car bolts.
You leave the brake.
I don't know whether that is a good economic principle or not. Yeah. Maybe that is what the policy is about. Like in your question, since you've given me the floor, I think is a little dangerous. I understand the point that we have these bigger problems with these really bad decisions being made, bad implementation, which have higher loss. Like it's very politically dangerous. And Ziauddin Saab might have a view on this. It is politically dangerous to call it a crime. Because then you end up, because you start trying to solve political or management problems by legal means. आपने कल जो है ना सर वो ले लेने अपने टैबलेट, परसों किसी ने कहना है कि जी इन्होंने तो एप्पल का ले लिया और माइक्रोसॉफ्ट का नहीं लिया, ये क्राइम है. Now that may be a bad decision, but once you start calling everything crime, we have seen this in the last 10 years. Okay, one way to do something, someone can make a bad decision. But not every bad decision is a crime. If you want to solve the bad decisions as an energy policy, I don't think you send it to NAB. And I don't think you are suggesting that. Lekin my problem is that if you start using that metaphor, aapke television wale jo dost hai na, they're going to turn bad ideas into crime. Crimes are going to go into courts. Courts bechari unko rehne dein is kaam se. उनको पहले ही बड़ा शौक है कि वो जो है ना they start making economic policy. That's not the venue. So what I'm saying is कि what has happened is कि because so many other instruments have failed, and because crime is very, very exciting in some ways, right? It has sort of the sexy value. So calling something a crime, metaphorically कहना अच्छी बात है कि जी ये तो ये crime है, ये इतनी बुरी policy बनाना. लेकिन in our country there is an actual slippery slope where essentially the hands of the policymaker, whether in business or government, will be tied. And what Amar Bilal was saying, you get the sense that फिर मैं कुछ भी नहीं करता, फिर मैं लेता ही नहीं, right? And so I think we cannot make up from legislation what we should be doing. I'll since I have the floor, if I might say one thing. This, by the way, this has been amazingly for this is keeping me up. Lekin I'm learning a lot. Lekin what I've been amazed at is how much of our conversation has been about white collar crime by government officials and how little of it has been about white collar crimes by business.
Good point.
So if I were in the US, if this conversation was in the US, I am quite sure the ratio would have been reversed. Now, I don't think that is because government here is any better. But I do think it is because the trust in government is much, much worse. And my problem is that in trying to make people, we are making government more inefficient.
Right.
We are tying the hands of innovation so instead of having better processes through incentives, through promotion, through how we gauge people, through how we hire people, through how we promote people. जो efficiency की बात शुएब साहब कर रहे थे. By turning everything into a crime, I think there is a slippery slope. So sorry for taking the time, and thank you everyone for.
No, I think that's a very valid point. Absolutely correct. We shouldn't turn everything into a crime. But Harun Saab, I'll come back to you for the last comment. I think quite frankly, our priorities I'm worried about. We are becoming a very sort of morally conscious country. And I think, quite frankly, the donors are pushing in this direction too. And we have to be very careful. Transparency International has been coined to make us look corrupt. For example, as I said, why is US not corrupt? I mean, yes, lobbying has caused more harm in US than anybody else. Just because they call it lobbying doesn't mean it's not corrupt. So the question is, we are worried about corruption. There's been a debate about corruption. Yet I am concerned that nobody has been at all worried about a 5.5 trillion loss. I'm not saying call it a crime. There is a huge loss in our books. Columns are not written on it. Programs are not done on it. And nobody wants to hold anybody responsible. I'm not saying anybody is responsible, but at least the government process is responsible. Where, for example, very simple question. Where is the government report on this? Where is the white paper on the 5.5 trillion loss? I hold the government responsible for not giving me a white paper. I hold the government responsible for not giving me a report on the 5.5. That is the government's job. The key job of the government is to give us loss. When they mention regulators, or everybody mentioned regulators, but you all know there are no regulators in this country. We've got regulatory bodies that don't function, that are not allowed to function. The laws are changed every year. We must take responsibility as a people that there is something wrong here in our priorities when we are yelling day and night about corruption and not about the fact that PIE is bleeding, railway is bleeding, everything is bleeding in this country. And we don't even worry about the losses, which are much more than what Ahsan Saab told us, that 150 billion they've recovered, NAB has recovered about 30 billion, 40 billion, I don't know. The numbers that they've recovered are trivial, and at the same time, we're losing far more. So Harun Saab, please sum it up. It's getting late.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be very simple. My learned colleagues.
If I may interject, Harun साहब, ये जन मसूद बात करना चाहते थे और इनफैक्ट मैं भी थोड़ी सी बात करना चाह रहा था.
जरूर करें, जरूर.
तो जन मसूद से पूछ लें कि क्या चाहते हैं वो.
मसूद साहब बोलिए. Sorry,
Thank you very much, Dr. Sadr. आपने देख लिया, and thanks, Dr. Nadeem. मैं सिर्फ इसलिए I wanted to just interject because one, I don't see anybody who has a genuine National Accountability Bureau experience over here. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was in Accountability Bureau for about 2 years, and we are. Zaudin Saab has very rightly brought out that prosecution is a very difficult part of white collar crime. It is the prevention. And when the National Accountability Bureau was set in, there was a National Accountability strategy, which was also a National Accountability strategy was also worked out. And essentially, there are 3 major parts. The first part is the awareness part. Unfortunately, awareness involves the entire societal approach, right from the childhood to upstairs, what is right and what is wrong. It is not in case of moral, but in case of financial proprietiness is much more important. Your responsibilities toward duties as far as the incompetence part which is coming in, or inefficiency part which is coming in, that you are not bothered that a loss is happening, but you need to be more moral, no, it's not moral. Religiosity is not the point. Point is the awareness has to be what is your responsibility. Once the awareness, that means more focus on education, more finances, more funding on schools, colleges, where the children must learn. A child in the British system speaks up that why are you cheating? Why are you asking me a question? You're not supposed to do this thing. We have witnessed it in United States that doing a course over there, you try and as a routine, why are you stuck, man? I'm just thinking, where should I put this organization or this institution? And you say, put it over here instead. Oh, man, I didn't ask you. You have now helped me. I'm not going to do this question. This is that point which has to be inculcated in our children, in our society. Only then we will start doing our job. We are not doing our job. We are only finger pointing. Every one of us speaks out. The worst part of it is that over the last, I would not talk of before 1971, because that was a different word altogether. The word started, we should look at it from 71 onwards. And if you look at it from 71 onwards, the problem, whether it is hockey or whether it is a political government, the problem is anyone who is at the helm of the affair doesn't want himself to be held accountable. He wants total authority. He doesn't want to follow rules. And all of us who are there in bureaucracy, military or civil bureaucracy, will facilitate him. All the advisors will facilitate him how to bypass these rules, how to hoodwink these rules. And our prosecution system, we have not developed a proper, any legal system. There have been billions which have been put into the reform in the legal systems from the World Bank, from the Asian Development Bank, from the Japanese government, from God knows where and where not, except for coming up with huge, massive buildings. There is no improvement in the speed, in the transparency, or in the quick redressal of the thing. Resultant is, today we are stuck. No accountability to me. Essentially, whosoever will be doing, it will be seen as political victimization, because the smaller level people, the lower level people, nobody is bothered. People are looking at it, how a political element is being victimized by the previous, by the current element. So that's what has been happening. That will continue to happen. So for once, there has to be a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. People, those who have been involved, have to come up, have to accept their guilt, like South Africa, have to announce that they desist from political activity in future. No interference by any institution. Institutions made strong, only then this competence will come in. Otherwise, whatsoever we may do, this cyclic chain hai, this will continue. I am sorry, I am saying it because I have seen it happening both from inside and seeing it happening for 3 years in the government of Zardari sitting in Peshawar. All these NGOs, they are being financed, they are being run only to facilitate my kith and kin or your kith and kin. It is not the poor. This NGO is eating away all our government. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Ji, Shoaib Sahab.
नदीम साहब, इधर पता नहीं अब वो बैठे हैं कि नहीं, डॉक्टर इकरामुल हक. He is a, big expert on this subject. अगर वो हैं तो.
बिल्कुल. Ikram साहब, are you here?
Yes, I.
जी जी बिल्कुल बताइए.
जी इकराम साहब.
Just my only worry is that when you make very simple laws, and the people who make those laws, they don't follow those laws, and then the entire institutional framework is such that you know better than me, sir, when you were federal tax ombudsman and we work and we saw, and there's a case study of only one institution, Federal Board of Revenue, that the kind of declarations they receive, and we are accusing others, but you can see that 99% parliamentarians say that their only source of earning is their emoluments from the state. And you can see their way of life. So here when we are talking about white collar crime, we should not mix it with inefficiency or institutional incapacities and other things. The real rot starts when where the politicians are born. You don't have a system where from the grassroots level they work with people, they come up, then they know how to serve their people. They are imposed on us through civil service examination. I was part and parcel of civil service for quite some time. I resigned, so there I learned. I am now on the other side. I now know what the businessmen do. The whole rot in our system is not because of what we have been discussing here, and I have serious disagreement on one point with all of you, that unless there is a complete insulation of institutions, inner and outer, no society wherever the system can flourish. Even in the worst monarchies, if systems and institutions are insulated from outside, inside, they work and they deliver. Our problem is the delivery system of these institutions, and unless we address this, all other things will remain like always wasting time writing papers, like us writing 6 articles in a week, and your great work when you were federal tax ombudsman, but things are still there. Yesterday, they asked them a simple question: please tell us what is the outstanding amount of refunds. You say you have achieved your budget. And you know what was the answer of the man in charge? He said, this is a state secret. We cannot tell you how much we owe to the taxpayers. Now, this is the attitude. And this attitude itself shows that before an elected parliament, sorry, I'm taking a time, that before a standing committee of National Assembly, a great 22 officers says, or 21 officers says, this is a state secret. I am not going to reveal it to you because they know that what they have collected is much less than what they owe to this taxpayer. There's no respect of...
That is exactly the point I'm making. It is the system and the process and not the corruption. And the problem is we are focused on the corruption and not the system and the process. We have no system in place. So let me bring in Adil Najam again. He wanted to say something. Adil, go ahead.
Thank you, Jinni. I just, earlier point, I don't want to take time, but one of the points that was made by you and someone else, I think Harun Saab is exactly right. Ki ye, dene wala haath aur lene wala haath. You know, the transparency index we use, I've always thought it's kind of silly. I wrote this little paper when the first one was published. Because we were the second worst, and I was offended कि why aren't we the first worst? एक country हमसे आगे कैसे निकल गई? लेकिन the real thing was that the countries that were giving the bribe were considered the least corrupt. The countries that were taking the bribe were somehow considered corrupt. I understand they have long papers on explaining why that is so, because they are saying that this system karta hai. Lekin there is a thing about sort of, you know, corruption is, when corruption is systemic, there are reasons, and I just wanted to highlight that point. And on your bigger question, you're exactly right. Efficiency is probably the bigger question, but the answer is not to ignore corruption. Ikram Saab, as he said, the legal part should be dealt with legally, and the efficiency part should be dealt with better systems. But I want to hear Harun sir.
Fair point. Acha ji, ek second. Ahmed Durrani Saab, you wanted to say something, but let me also put it to you slightly differently. And I think all of you will appreciate this probably, that when you read William Dalrymple's book, Anarchy, it's wonderful to see that they indulged in mega corruption, and now they're acting holier than thou, and they are the, mashallah, neat people. Just like in the US, black lives don't matter, but they are not corrupt, we are corrupt. Question is really, Amir Saab, we need to build our own home and not necessarily just chase the angle of accountability and corruption. When are we going to get rid of our losses in railways, energy, etc. That's my key problem these days. Amir Durrani.
Also, thank you very much, Nadeem sir. Actually, you know, you've just hit the nail on the head and in fact made my remarks a bit defunct, because you see the problem that I think I'm hearing in the seminar, and also because of some work that we did on Afghanistan some years back, that really when you raise the slogan of anti-corruption, two things happen, right? One is that either corruption goes under the carpet and it has a long staying power to stay under the system until and unless, you know, the anti-corruption slogans go away. Or the second thing, which the governments don't realize, I think people like Shoaib Sadul Saab and the people like General Masood, who have actually been in the system, understand the power of corruption. So corruption has more money than any government will ever have. I mean, that's the simplest way I can put it. So it has the ability to buy out, threaten, literally buy out the country if they want. So I think when an entity, a state, or a political system, or a political party makes this thing that they make anti-corruption a slogan, more often than not, they fail. A more, or let's say a better, a preferred approach would be something which is simplistically called good enough governance. But this is really what we see in the America of the 1700s, the 1800s. I mean, look at the history of Standard Oil, look at the history of American Railway, you know, and I don't want to even talk about the Rockefellers and the rest, but, you know, what you see there is good enough governance. And really the good enough governance flows from a respect for the citizenry. And unfortunately, constitutionally, Pakistan does not guarantee or give the respect to the citizens that is enshrined in constitutions of country like, let's say, the US. The second point, I don't think, and I have to disagree with Hamid Sharif Saab, and although I do, you know, I mean, I agree on most of the things he says, but Hamid Saab, you know, this is a societal issue. So if you read at campuses, Faces of Corruption, you go through people who have written about this, you will find that when you're dealing with, whether it's security and justice, whether it's the armed forces, whether it's the bureaucracy, whatever it is, a society is what produces these various segments, right? So proportionally, the same amount of corrupt people on first selection will exist in each one of these cadres, right? Now, the second thing is, yes, some cadres can have more rule of law within the institution. Let's say maybe the army, maybe the not so the police, maybe the police, maybe more so, let's say, Shahbaz Sharif's preferred small new institutions, which he creates every hour. So the thing is that what we keep failing is when you have this kind of ring-fenced motorway. I mean, that's a great example in Pakistan, right? I think at one point, I think still motorway survives. Motorway survives because not only is the institution ring-fenced, its operational environment has been ring-fenced. And it has basically shown you that you could actually do wonders in Pakistan with institutions, as long as the societal influence is not there. So I think for me, standalone institution creation, whether it be the competition commission, whether it be this, whether it be that, I think is a fallacy and it doesn't work. And I think the other last point I think this is Adil, mostly, you know, why are we talking, Adil, more about government in Pakistan is because government unfortunately controls the economy and jobs of Pakistan. I mean, if you just look at the amount of civil servants in Sindh, it's 1.3 million people. That's more than the entire private sector employs in Sindh. So can I just be very real that the reason we are having government as under fire in this discourse, that's the reason. So sorry, Nadeem Saab, but I think that was my wider take on why we are going through this.
I think good enough government. I like that concept. Very good. Tawqir Saab ko badi der se haath khada. Tawqir Saab, why don't you have the question? Then we'll go to the speakers to sum up. Tawqir Saab.
जी जी नहीं साहब, मैंने क्वेश्चन एक्चुअली रेज किया था पॉलिटिकल इन्फ्लुएंस और पॉलिटिकल जो इश्यूज आते हैं विदिन पुलिस और जेल और all administrative things. As long as we have that influence, as long as there is no political will for reforms, we cannot achieve any objective. So my question to Dr. Shoaib Sadal is, what are the hurdles where do we stand for reforms? Thank you.
Ji, Dr. Saab, aapke last comments, then we'll kind of go to Harun and etc. Whiteboard. Ji, bataiye, Dr.
Ji, Takir Saab, actually, thank you for raising this issue, because this is a core issue. Politicization of institutions, and in fact, leading to capture of institutions. So, iska solutions to obvious hai. Can we set up institutions which can give us good recruitment? The answer is honestly no. There was time when people never had any issues with the integrity of the commissions, whether Federal Public Service Commission and to a slightly lower degree, the Provincial Public Service Commissions. Now, they are full of bureaucrats, and many a time bureaucrats have, dubious reputation because they are well connected, politically and so on and so forth. So if we can insulate our institutions from politicization and from, capturing those institutions, I think much of the problem will be solved. A couple of more points, I know we have taken a lot of time, but the issue is that, in a larger canvas, we need to have a legal system which includes our law of evidence, our PPC, our CRPC, and so on, which is, in sync with our cultural and our administrative and judicial norms. At the moment, it is not in sync. This was given to us by a colonial power. They did it whatever they wanted to. But, in a country where you hardly can find one witness who will tell the truth, what can you do by way of investigation or by way of conviction if you are a judge? My sense is that we need to rewrite these, books, whether it is, CRPC, PPC, law of evidence, and so on and so forth. And in all those books, there should be a separate chapter, in fact, on white-collar crime, because this is our most serious concern at the moment. Now, I need to, clarify it that white-collar crime is one of those rare species where you deal with under both the criminal law as well as the civil law. Now, if for any case dealt with by NAB or by FIA, and we all know that there is no country in the world where similar organizations can go for 100% successes, and there are many cases which are prevented also because of the existence of these agencies. But what I'm trying to say is that requirement of law is that the evidence should be beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, nobody has defined this term beyond a reasonable doubt. Is it 99%? Is it 80%? Is it 70%? So it is left, then to the judge. In other countries now, they have created different slabs that, okay, if it is slightly less than beyond reasonable doubt, then you can give maybe slightly lesser punishment, but you can't sort of acquit the accused given the, so-called benefit of doubt to the accused. Now, if you start giving benefit of doubt to the accused in every case, there will be no conviction at all, because there is no case in which the evidence is beyond reasonable doubt. So what I'm trying to suggest is that particularly while dealing with the white-collar crime, you lower the bar, you bring it down to the probability of balance. You know, if the evidence is 51%, it should be treated as okay. And, you know, and if it is even less than 51%, although that is a requirement of the civil law as well, then you can deal with it administratively or whatever, so that people know that, you know, they can be asked questions, they can be brought to justice, and, you know, and then, you know, what Jan Masood said, I think that is a very important issue, that prevention has to start from home. You know, what sort of, you know, grooming we are getting, what sort of, the role of teachers in our times was totally different. Now it is totally different. Now, if your schools are also failing to give you the proper value systems, your, you know, peers are also, you know, there is, you know, one theory in, and it is a, you know, called a mathematical model of crime. And it says that, look, if you want to really have some deterrent value of the justice system, then raise the level of detection and lower the level of, rather, quantum of punishment. You know, in our case, whenever there is a reform, what we do is we say, okay, the punishment is raised from 20 years to 30 years. And if it is already 30 years, we say we raise it to death penalty. And as, you know, one criminologist once said, that raise the death penalty to for every crime, but keep the detection rate 0, so that, you know, nothing is achieved. So I think with this, I would like to stop here. And I still see Dr. Shahid Hashmat, he is sitting there, and there are other friends also. But thank you very much for all of you, and over to Harun Sharif Saab to sum it up. And I think what Dr. Nadeem said in his introductory remarks, that this is not subject something which can be dealt with in 2 hours seminar. I think research and in fact more and more universities in this country which give masters and PhD degrees in various aspects of criminology, and more importantly, you know, this aspect, white-collar crime. So white-collar crime, please don't confuse that it is only a criminal act. It is a civil act as well. So at the same time, whereas you don't deal with the murder case as a civil, you know, under civil law, or you know, robbery or burglary or whatever. So Dr. Ikramul Haq Sahab, we always learn from him, and you know, he referred to my tenure as FTO also. You know, when I was there, the average refund amount that was being given to the taxpayers was 220 million. When I left, it was 9 billion. So there was a time when, you know, the FBR went to the president and lobbied that this, you know, office should be closed because the government is short of money, and you know, he is trying to give more and more money to the taxpayers. And I said, do whatever you want to, but as long as I have this responsibility. The point is, if the taxpayer money is owed by the government. Why should it not be returned? That is the basic issue. And same thing is now happening. You know, they are withholding the refunds because they have their justifications. You know, even ministers used to come, finance ministers, they would come to me and they would say, Dr. Saab, please, bear with us because there is no money and we want to stagger it and this, that. The point is you can't compromise on these issues. I never did. But it's a much bigger issue in which each one of us has to contribute at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harun Saab. Can I raise this issue with you again? My view is, reading history, no country has made it without corruption. In fact, the path to development lies through sin. We are trying to outlaw sin and keep inefficiency alive. We are the only country in the world that wants to outlaw sin. We want to ban alcohol, but keep all other crimes alive. It's the same thing. We want to ban corruption, yet lose money in public sector enterprises, build bad universities, build bad everything. So please sum it up for us, Harun Saab. Should we keep chasing corruption and the white man does corruption and gets away with it and we don't? So how do you sum it up, please?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Haq. I think a lot has been said. I will be very focused. And obviously the concept of positive corruption has been debated in many countries and many jurisdictions. So we do go on a very petty issues and leave larger issues. That is a very valid observation. A couple of things. I think I would take more, recent my experience and try to reflect on few things. Number one is the pressure on political government to do populist things in unprecedented. So the real, you speak of system and stuff, that gets very little attention. I quote very, practical examples. Early morning, what would Prime Minister do is they will meet the people who deal with media. So your constituency has become that how to control the social media and media through populist interventions. And I can give you examples when 21 years back, I tried to did some reforms in capital market and there was protest against me by brokers. What I went to Sartaj Aziz Saab and I said, "Ke mere khilaf to wo placards aa gaye, ab kya karu?" So he laughed, he has a wonderful smile. And he basically said that you must be doing something right. Ye change ho gaya hai. Now the vested interests influence on high level policy is unprecedentedly high. And all the time you are trying to come to terms with that, pressure on our political system. Exposure of political class again is low. And I think they need to understand the fine balance between politicians and bureaucrats. Isko kaise karna hai. So a good civil servant, and Shoaib Sahab and I have discussed, the job is to protect the top policymakers from these interests. In fact, the civil servants become facilitators of that vested interest to reach out to the higher places. Ab ye bahut network wasi ho gaya, isko how to break it, that only can be done internally and by politicians. And populism by donors, I give you an example when Prime Minister asked me कि आपने ease of doing business index को बेहतर करना है. I said कि Prime Minister उसको बेहतर करने से I have very little evidence कि investment आएगी. And then there was a debate कि आपने investment climate की reforms करनी है कि ease of doing business को बेहतर करना है. And eventually I was tasked कि आपने index को बेहतर करना है because we want to look good. So ये चीज जो है इसको seriously सोचने की जरूरत है at the higher level. I was very fortunate. मैंने 3 दफा महातीर मोहम्मद से मुलाकात हुई और 2 दफा one-to-one हुई. And I raised these questions to him. And I will sum up there. He could be wrong, but at least he has such a great experience. His first reflection was that you need to deregulate a lot of things. He said it was a mistake of mine to fix my ministries because that is a lifelong thing. It's an ongoing thing. आपको बहुत सी चीजें you need to let go. Reform is not only that you grab power, reform is to let go. So that was a message which came very clearly. He said, on one hand, please don't create an atmosphere of fear and let people make money. But at the same time, आपके जो systems हैं prevention के, उसमें investment करना शुरू कर दें and insulate those systems from political pressures as well as bureaucracy. Technocrats को दे दीजिए. So these are the few, I think, things which we need to say. And third, he said कि आप market को, capitalism को, आदिल ने बात की है. और मैंने शुरू ही की थी अपनी पहली presentation कि OECD had formalized corruption. और वो बैलेंस शीट पे इजाजत देते थे OECD कंपनीज को कि आप 25% ब्राइब देके कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ले लीजिए. So that is something, it is everywhere. They will do anything to, and I don't want to get into my experience in China. We need to correct our systems there by promoting competition, bring lots of players who could be efficient market agents. Otherwise, जो आपका ये crony capitalism है, few people extracting rents all the time, it will not go down. अब जितने मर्जी इसके ऊपर firewalls बना दीजिए. Unless and until they are threatened by real competition, open it up. मेरे ख्याल से that is going to be difficult. So and I will end that, while protection needs to be given to bureaucrats, I agree with that. But at the same time, the criteria of appointing somebody or promoting needs to be looked into performance rather than loyalty or tenure of service. Because jab tak aap loyalty or tenure of service ka incentive denge, that system will not function. And I see at that point, these two have much higher weightage as compared to performance. So I would like to end there. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. San Saab, would you like to say any last words or shall we close the session? Is the San Saab there or is he gone? I think it's probably gone. Well, folks, thank you very much. It's been a very enjoyable session. I've enjoyed it enormously. It's a fun session. I think we really need to begin to think about these things a lot. All I'll say is very simply that, look, we need to make the economy grow. We need to make this country go further. For the last 40 years, we've struggled with fund programs, trying to get our tax system in order. We've struggled with every bit of donor invention. And we haven't even come to the corruption and donors on which Harun and Hamid and Adil can all speak. There's a lot of corruption in donor agencies or even academia. I think Adil Najam could speak on that. I have noticed a fair amount of corruption even in academia. So corruption exists in the world. Corruption is in human nature. The question is, can we build better systems to make welfare happen? And our failure really is in our inability to build better systems. I keep coming back to the 5.5 trillion loss in energy. Our universities are a mess. We are losing billions of dollars in our universities. We might as well close them down. We have a mess everywhere. And I think it's time the media and everybody turned to the mess and said, we need to build up the mess. Let corruption be for a while. Let's stop chasing the ghost of white-collar crime. And white-collar crime does not exist only in the government. It exists in the private sector. For example, when you give licenses, what is it? Is white-collar crime or not? When you build these housing societies that are being built all over the place, is this white-collar crime or not? Now, who's involved in the housing societies? Housing societies are corruption of the cooperative law, and we'll come to that at some stage. We'll do a webinar on that. What is this cooperative society? Has anybody examined it? And lastly, I'd say our biggest failure is we have no research anywhere. Our bureaucracy, our media, no one wants to do any research. We want to live on today's slogan. With the result, we don't know what's happened. And we are very facile in our analysis. So I hope our webinars at some point will allow us to improve our analysis, not be superficial, and get deeper into our questions. With that, I thank you all. Harun Sharif, thank you for organizing this webinar. All of you, thank you for such vigorous participation. It's been fun. It's been enjoyable. I've learned a lot. I've really understood how Pakistan works in the white-collar crime business and what's happening. Thank you, folks. All the best. Thank you to you, Shoaib Sadal Saab, Adil Saab, everybody, Ziauddin Saab. Bye-bye. Khuda Hafiz.